Hey, it's Steve Orlando. I am back here with the conversation series we've been calling Who's Got the Juice? Who's the we in that scenario? PM Spirits, folks that I work for before my life as a comic book writer. So in the past, we've kept these conversations, pretty relaxed, tasting at the end, but I think we're going to switch it up today after a quick intro, taste at the beginning, and let that sort of guide our conversation. So who the hell am I speaking with today? Someone I've known for about 5 years, Joel Kim Booster. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited. I love free anything, especially free booze.
And that's what I'm here to provide. I rarely charge men for my services, so thank you for coming on. We're going to taste in a minute, but man, as I was saying before we started talking, it's been a fucking journey for both of us. We met probably 5 years ago at the first ever FlameCon. For folks who don't know, FlameCon is one of the only queer-focused Comic-Cons in the country. The first one was at a Greek wedding venue with no air conditioning, which was a fun time. They actually kicked us out at about 5, snuck in a wedding, and then let us back in at 8 o'clock for our party where we had like nerd-themed burlesque. So it was a wild day, but on that day, a young man came to me and asked me my opinion of Nightwing's ass, which, for folks coming in from outside of the comics industry, canonically the best ass in comics. Joel, who was that person?
Oh, that was me. That was definitely me. Yeah.
I guess you thought I was an authority at that time, but I was pretty much a Nightwing virgin, so that was very generous of you to ask me that.
I can't remember why I asked you that, other than like, I think like you at the time were like the only, if not the most prominent, like LGBT DC writer, I think. And so that definitely made me, want to get to the important DC topics.
Bisexuals of DC, queers of DC, deciding the canonicity of Nightwing's ass. Yeah, it's a fair question.
Sure, we'll take that.
Obviously I've been doing a couple things since then, but we're not here to talk about me. Like, talk to these folks. Like, you have exploded out in all directions since you're asking me about butts. So what's been going on?
I mean, a lot has gone on since then. I think like back then I was still working a day job at a startup and like doing freelance writing. Since then, I've had the opportunity to write for some incredible shows like Big Mouth, Billy on the Street, the other two on Comedy Central. My stand-up has appeared like since then. I debuted on Conan and a couple times in The Late Show with James Corden, and my Comedy Central half hour came out, and I've had the opportunity to appear in a bunch of other cool shows as well. So a little bit of everything.
All right, so I'm going to switch it up. I want to ask more about that, but let's actually, why don't we pour now, and then we can toast that, because it has been a wild 5 years for both of us, and then obviously I got more questions. We're drinking today one of the mezcals from Netta. You had said to me off the top of my head that you were a vodka or agave fan, and so we sent you this guy, which is a limited run. I think you said you're like 188 of 200 some odd bottles. Is that true?
Yeah. 188 of 264.
And we've tasted Netta on the series before, a small craft producer, and the short version of my pitch on agave is that because when you step out of Jalisco and tequila and move into mezcal, you can put almost any of the thousands of species of agave into a bottle. You get a lot more diversity. You get a lot more interest in flavor because you can have different types of agave in one bottle. It's more like a blend of wine than what you have with tequila, which can only be one type of agave. And by the way, I'm not shading that, like it's a great version of one thing, but if you want to like really sort of do some cultural exploration, and some exploration of the land in a bottle, I tend to think mezcal can be a lot more interesting for that reason. Why is that of note here? Because this is the Tequilana, and that's actually a clone of Blue Weber agave that you use in tequila, but grown outside of that specific region in Jalisco. So you have some things that should taste somewhat similar to tequila once you try it, but also hopefully a little more interesting. This is actually coincidentally one of the last runs of bottles that was milled by this producer with the classic ox and stone grinding method that they use in Mexico. So that's all a lot of technical stuff, oxes and stones and things like that, but most importantly, let's taste it and see what you think.
Yeah. And this is a pretty high alcohol content, correct?
I've been drinking it since I was like 7 years old. So.
Okay. You're at the end of your day. I'm still have half a day to go of work. So
no, but it is. Hey, thank you. It's on us.
Ooh, that burns in the good way.
I would agree. So I wanted you to taste it. I get like that. I do get this sort of like creamy vanilla character that you get off a lot of tequilas, and it is bold. But you had said higher alcohol content. That's 100% true. One of the reasons that is because with stuff like PM, the people I used to work for, they carry, they try to do as little as possible in between like the person making it and when it reaches you. So we tasted this neat for folks watching. It'd be totally normal to have it on a large format ice cube or something to let it open up as well. But it's all sort of in the mindset of, we don't want to get in the way of what an artisan is doing. And one of the things, before we bring it back around to us and sort of the connections between all the things we do that we've come around to on these previous conversations when talking to people, is that with craft spirits versus large scale large scale production. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's something beautiful about the regularity of like every bottle of well, Patron, it doesn't matter. Any bottle of anything always tasting the same. You can rely on that, and there's something beautiful about that. But it's craft spirits are a little different because you have, someone who agaves can take somewhere sometimes up, over 10 to 20 years to mature. You have what I think is a creative project in this bottle, and I think a lot of people don't think about that when it comes to spirits. So it's why they like to get out of the way. It's why it's one of the reasons I like to sell this stuff. Before I was living off my work as a creative, which, you had said you were working at a startup. My job before I was doing comics was selling these spirits. I was a wine salesman and spirit salesman then for 10 years. So that's how we're here talking about this.
I feel like I'm in hands, yeah. I
And
know way too much about this now.
well, it's the same stuff that lets me know about the exact dimensions of Nightwing's ass. Let me know about everything in that bottle. It's the same gene. So with that in mind, one of the things I always like talking about, I was like many people, I shitload of jobs before I got into being where I want to be. Built my brand, got to where, well, I'm not where I want to be, because when you never stop, but got to a good place, trying to find even better places. I was a lifeguard. I was a spirit specialist for 10 years. But what was your journey like? You had said you worked at a startup. How did you get to even where you were when we met in 2015 and then evolve from there?
I mean, I've been working since I was 14. Like, I was one of those kids who got my worker's permit really early and worked at the library was my very first job, putting away books. And since then, like, I always had to have a job in high school if I wanted anything. Like, my parents stopped giving me an allowance when I got my first job. So it was very much that kind of household where you needed to work if you wanted to have any money to spend on anything. So I worked at like every kind of food service imaginable. I worked at a Dippin' Dots stand in the mall. I worked at Cold Stone Creamery. I worked at Quiznos and Subway. I worked at a video rental store called Family Video, which was low-key probably one of my favorite jobs. I think it was like the coolest job that I had because it's the only one that basically doesn't exist anymore. It feels definitely like a relic of an older time working at a video rental store. But I mean, the 4 years that I worked at Family Video was like the biggest creative growth in my life, almost, because I was just consuming any movie that we only got one copy of. I was like, that is a movie I'm going to watch. And so I was just exposing myself to all this weird shit for 4 years and just absorbing all of that. And then, I went to college. I waited tables. I waited at the Olive Garden, if you've heard of that fine dining establishment.
Like a small Italian startup, is that
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think it's coming to Boston.
And then after college, I worked like at a miserable call center for a while, and then I started temping at Groupon, another relic of a different time. And I ended up working at Groupon basically for like 5 years, moving my way up in the like I was like the 70 something employee of Groupon basically. And then my last job was in New York. I was a part of a small scrappy men's sock company startup that was just 4 employees in a WeWork. And it was definitely one of the weirdest jobs I ever had because my bosses were very supportive of my comedy career. And they kept telling me like, oh, the more successful you are in comedy, the more successful we are. So we want to support you in that. And I kept being like, okay, I'll accept that. But also, the more successful I am in comedy, the closer I am to quitting, right? Like it's my success in comedy does not make this company successful, but whatever. I am very happy that they believed that because they gave me a lot of leeway to go out and do comedy while I was still working.
So you said men's stock company?
Sock company, sock.
Okay, I was gonna say like what makes it a men's
Oh.
stock? It's like an smoke cigars and things.
Stocks are for boys, bonds are for girls. Everybody knows that.
No, that's a fact of life. If I understood that, maybe my life would have gone a lot differently. It's the bonds I got. That's what made me like I am when I was a kid. So also like family video and weird shit is fascinating to me because I can't imagine shit got that weird at family video.
Well, our whole thing, we actually were one of the only rental chains that had porn too, and like the whole bottom line was like, we cater to every member of the family. So even your perverted Uncle Joe, like everybody gets catered to. And we had like the same shit as Blockbuster. So it was, and I guess like by weird shit, I mean like Birth and like weird indie movies that like, we only got a couple of. I got fired at Family Video for renting Rachel Getting Married without paying for it. And I still own that DVD to this day.
As you should. That should be framed behind you. Yeah. It's like my Marvel rejection letter from 2003, which I have in my office. So that's a wild run. I have lifeguard, sold booze. Excuse me. I had lifeguard, TA Russian in college for money, and sold booze comics. You have like so many more dots on the map than me. So that is pretty wild. That always brings me to the next thing that I'm interested in asking people, as I had joked about, all the stuff that makes me successful, or at least one of the things that makes me successful in comics, this sort of deep well of lore I have in my head when it comes to DC and Marvel stuff, usually Image stuff, other books more and more as I grew older. Also, honestly, made Spirits a good fit for me. Everything that could be known about that bottle, I would know it, and it would be like that for the entire portfolio. It's why I came to love agave. It's why I came to love Scotch. All these facts and data were always really fascinating to me in the same way that I could tell you every single person that's been Captain America.
It's crazy. It's crazy how much space like every member of the Bat family takes up in my brain. Like, what am I missing? Like, what is not there that should be there? Because I remember, Bet Kane as the original Batgirl. Like, it is so stupid. I wish I didn't know it, but I will never forget it.
And a tennis star, don't forget.
Yeah, and a tennis star, an Olympic level athlete.
So what I was going to say, that crossover in a surprising way. You've done like, a Yahtzee of gigs. Now you're doing stand-up. Like, has that stuff informed your gig now in a way that you didn't expect? Or like, you must have learned something, at least dealing with being able to, I would assume being able to have anything said to you and roll with it, which obviously is beneficial for comedy. That had to at least happen to video rental. When Uncle Joe comes up to the front.
That's what's so stressful for me as a writer in the pandemic times is because when I was working customer service, any sort of job where I was interacting with people constantly, like I was just being like, I need that stimulation to write. Like I need to be meeting like all different kinds of people, like brief encounters, longer, like troublesome encounters, anything. And now my circle of people that I interact with is shrunken so much that I'm just I have no like inspiration anymore because I'm not dealing with some horrific woman who, wants to haggle about her late fees. Those are the characters that populated my life for so long, and now they're missing, and I miss that.
So you needed people being terrible to you, and now that you're successful, it's proven a stumbling block.
For sure.
That's interesting. I mean, the thing that fascinates me too is sort of as I got older and became professional, my view of spirits changed. Like I mean, we can guess what I was like in college. Drinking my late Jewish grandmother's handle of Dewar's that was probably bought in like 1975 and still good. We think. I don't know. I drank it, and then when I got into doing this and finding, as you can sort of see, the stories and the passion behind these bottles, my appreciation for everything changed. And then and I got to see it as a creative endeavor. And when I became at least old enough, I started going to cons and trying to break in when I was 12. So like this would have been my, I don't know, 23rd Comic-Con International had it happened. For a while, I couldn't go to parties and things like that because, again, I was 13 years old. But as I grew up and I knew about this stuff, it became, for me at least, it became like a way to get a foothold in the conversation. Almost no matter who it was in comics, they probably had an interest in wine and spirits, and because it's kind of an insular industry, they didn't really have that knowledge. So when I mentioned that was my job, it was like telling them I was a sorcerer or a necromancer or something. They were instantly fascinated. And suddenly we were talking, and maybe it was an editor of DC or Marvel, maybe it was like the dean at Savannah College of Art and Design, but there was always something to talk about. So, how has your view of spirits evolved? Obviously, you came to a place where you like the vodka and agave. I'm an agave and scotch guy. First of all, like how did it evolve? Because we all sort of mature and change in our own ways. And has your interest, has it been able to break any barriers for you? How does it function in a professional setting? I think it's different in every industry.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like drinking changed for me a lot. Obviously in high school and college, like I was drinking shit and I didn't care, It was just like anything to get you to the destination of being drunk. And like it's weird to get old and suddenly be like, no, actually I will just have like a casual, like neat glass of tequila just for the taste and the sensation of it all. But like drinking is definitely, I mean, for the early years of my stand-up career, that's how you got paid. You got paid in drink tickets. And so like you sort of had to make that worth your while at a certain point. When you're performing at a bar, you're like, I'm not going to get a well whiskey. If I'm going to get a free drink, I'm going to get a free drink and it's going to be good. And so in my poverty years, getting paid in drink tickets, that's when I really started to develop a slightly more sophisticated taste of what kind of alcohol I would want. That's if they would let you use your drink ticket for like a top shelf drink at the bar. So many times it was just but you make do with what you have.
I mean, no one's had that answer, and I actually think it's fascinating. Like the necessities of the comedy world, at that time at least, sort of pushed you into developing, diversifying your tastes.
Yeah. It's Tecate again, like it's just that beer over and over again.
Listen, Tecate was the first beer I shotgunned, so I'll never shade her at all. But I hear you. Yeah, it's fascinating because one of the previous interviews, someone said something that I really like, that when you're at least where he's at now in his career, having a drink with someone, you're really, especially if it's a bottle you've bought or a cocktail you've made, you're taking something that is special to you, and then you're choosing to share that moment with someone, and that is something that he does consider is special above the obviously baseline goal of, for some folks, just getting quite relaxed, things like that. And it was a long time coming for me to sort of come to that point of view, because well, first of all, ironically, I didn't drink in high school, and I actually didn't even drink when I turned 21. Out of principle, I went to the gas station across from the Denny's where I was writing comics at 5 a.m. In Syracuse, and I bought a beer on principle, and then I gave it to someone else. So it was I went really from like, oh, this is not my bag, to like, okay, it's senior year and I'm stressed, we're just going to like fly to Mars, to, oh, I'm sharing someone's passion with other people. And it's interesting how that evolved for me, both by necessity, like you said, and also sort of as my appreciation for arts and passions outside my own sort of came to the forefront. And that's only increased in my life, like there was a time when I only gave a shit about comics. I was an asshole then, less of an asshole now. And now I see that sort of, the thing that made me stay in comics from the time I was 12 until when I guess got in when I was 28, but not really, because like you're never in. People apply that in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure, in that respect, I wanted to ask, you're doing comedy now. When you were working at 14, did you already have that laser focus, or did you not know what it was going to be at that point?
Oh man, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew that like it had to be something that involved writing, because writing is the only thing that I've ever really been good at doing, and like performing too. on top of that. But like in terms of just like telling stories, man, was like the only thing that I ever had an interest in from the time I was like a little kid to now. And so like it definitely changed. Like, you know, I thought about writing, I thought about being a novelist, I thought about just being an actor, I thought about a lot of things. But like the one thing that I knew from the time I was like 14 was like, you're going to do something in this realm, and your parents aren't going to be able to help you, aren't going to be able to support you while you're doing it. And you know, I had no illusions about like what kind of life the artist's life was going to be, and so I always knew that I would need to have that job, that survival job. And so it was always just like head down, do the work, and find the time to do your real work when you can.
All right, so you said something that was interesting to me. You know, telling stories, and I haven't asked a question like this on the conversation series before, but it's something that I talk to when folks are trying to start writing what I do a lot, and it interests me. You know, you are writing long form. You've written, as you said, episodes of TV shows. You've also done stand up. For me, the perception with up and comers is often that like a short, like if they're doing like an 8-page story for an anthology or something, which most people do, including myself, when they first get in, they think it's easier than writing like a 1-issue story or a 4-issue series, but it's actually so much harder to do something complete in 8 pages. So I know nothing about how your answer will be, but yeah, compare like because every you know every joke is a story, not even to the performance. You're telling multiple stories a night. What's harder? How does the process differ when you're getting up there and essentially jamming, I don't know, 30 stories into one of your sets versus if you're doing an episode of a show or if you are doing something longer?
I definitely think like doing a script comes easier to me on a certain level. I think like I have a brain for structure, and I have a brain for, you know, that the arc of a story. And so I love to do that, and it comes very quickly. And I'm a very fast writer. You know, those first drafts come fast and furious. The second and third and fourth drafts, sometimes they wait. But the thing about stand up and those 30 stories is that like there's such a synthesis that comes into it of all these different sorts of things. There's timing, and there's the performance aspect, and there's like, you know, I suffer over just like word choice. Like little tiny words can mean, you know, and make the entire difference of a joke. And so like it takes me so much longer to perfect one 1-minute joke than it does for me to write one like 40-page script for, you know, a half hour of television.
And do you change that? So it's funny, again, the word choice, like it's fascinating to me because I know myself as a creator, if I had no deadline, I could like, there's no end to the amount of line edits I could do on a script. You know, like people tend to think like, oh, it's done. It's never fucking done. You know, I will be like, oh, is it weird or strange? And I'll go back and forth, you know, as long as I have, it's probably the same, I'm guessing, you know, like eventually I just have to call something done. Otherwise I'll just be like, well, this could be, you know, and I find myself just there's always something you can change. Because we're sort of like, we're bottomless perfectionists, I feel like, when you're creatives. Like, and I don't even like to say perfectionist because that implies something can be perfect.
Yeah.
It's almost like you will just keep polishing something. And in my case, sometimes I polish it until I'm like, oh, there's nothing fucking left here.
I've definitely made things worse in service of trying to make it perfect.
It's crazy because yeah, I mean, I've done like I did an annual. It was double sized issue, and I had a day and a half to write it, which is not ideal, by the way. It's 40 pages, but when it came out, yeah, everything was so just sort of like, like I didn't have time to worry about it.
Yeah,
and
that's why like a good editor or a good producer is like sort of the paramount to what we do, because like if I didn't have good producers who, you know, were creative partners and told me like, no, it's done, or no, like I would continue to like take it to that edge where it's like, oh no, like suddenly changing the little bits are making this absolutely worse than it could have been when you just like should have stopped.
And the changes are interesting to me because there obviously like almost any creative endeavor is parallel, but they're not the same. So, you know, you talked about structure. I think about it all the time. However, everything you do when you're performing live is it's like a living document. So where does the line come between like sort of the energy when you step out there and what was in your head, what was on the page before? I'm sure it's got to be more liquid than something I do. I mean, when I send it off,
For sure.
it's
I
off.
mean, that's the third component of stand-up that's so intoxicating and so like wonderful, and why it's so addicting and why I love it is that there's an immediacy to it that you can't replicate in any other media, like you're out there on the stage and like I'm not somebody who, I have my written jokes, but there's so much crowd work. Like the crowd is so specific to every show that you can't predict how one joke is going to go over, and you might have to change something on the fly based on like a response to an older like a joke earlier in the set. Like regionality like plays into it so much because so many of my jokes are reference heavy, so it is about bringing this thing that is so specific to you and trying to fit it to this other character, which is like an audience of between like 12 and 300 people sometimes, so it's that immediacy that really keeps me interested in stand up and wanting to do it more and more.
The immediacy I feel is something so foreign to me that it does feel intoxicating from the outside, for in both in all the positive and negative ways, like if I write something, it's usually out of my head and out of my inbox for 2 months before it comes out. And that's great because I can settle with it, but also if people don't like it, it's not as though I'm getting heckled a second later. I'm reading the comment section and being like, oh fuck, like, and I can't make the sort of pivot adjustments. Sometimes even it's like walking into a wall because you're like, oh fuck, I know what's coming the next issue, and it's coming one way or another, versus sort of reflecting off that. So that is really fascinating to me, and it is something that I think you're right. Like it is only with, especially live performance and at least partially improvisational performance, it almost has to be. And improvisation is probably sort of what I want to hit on in sort of the final segment here. We're living in a time where we have no choice but to, I would say, often with our creative endeavors, improvise and innovate due to the restraints of the world. We're here talking about, we're here on a conversation series that maybe wouldn't happen if we didn't live in a pandemic world where we were looking to sort of connect different industries in new ways and bring content in ways that are new to a demographic that hasn't seen them before. I'm a comics writer who used to work for a spirits company doing this combo series because the people, that demographic, our clients, like, are looking for new and interesting content. It's weird talking about spirits when parts of the country can't even go out and have a drink. So we want to talk about the idea as a whole. And I think you see like people in service, they are innovating that, whether it's legislation allowing places to do drinks to go to help restaurants survive, whether it's different types of educational content. Spirits producers, PM included, are having to innovate. I've had to innovate. I've done a lot more. I've done a lot more original work than I ever thought I would do in the pandemic, because those are the folks that are pushing out new content right now. I've done a lot more digital. I've done digital work, and I've also started sort of pivoting my management to a stronger presence on social media and stronger social media engagement. Like, you probably didn't see, there's no reason you would because it was stupid, but I have been creating characters for one of my next books with heavy interaction on Twitter, because that's where the world is living right now, in their offices. So that's how you can make them be part of what you're doing. I can run a poll of mean animals, and 2 months later, like, that whoever they pick is a villain in Commanders in Crisis. And it was the swan, by the way, I picked as the meanest animal. So innovation, that makes me need to ask you, in this time, which we don't really know when it's going to end, what is next? Comedy, yourself and your peers, you can't rest on your laurels in the same way that no one else can. So what's next? What are you doing? What do you think the whole concept is going to be doing? Because none of us know. None of us. We all say, like, we'll get back to it next year. Everybody's saying, like, oh, conventions next year. None of us know. The only thing we know is that we're going to have to keep doing new stuff. So where do you think it's going?
I mean, it's tough. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, I just did a show at a drive-in theater I've done shows on Zoom, obviously on Instagram Live, and elsewhere in other new and unusual ways. And like, for me, it's torture because like, again, like the audience is such a big component of it. So being able to like be comfortable just talking into a void and like having, trying to do that is not, it's actually forcing me to learn how to rewrite, to write all over again in a way, because like I'm so used to writing on stage. I'm so used to like writing, like having a premise and just going up on stage and talking about it and being in conversation with the audience in a real visceral way, like that immediacy that we were talking about. And that's all completely gone because there's just no feedback anymore. And so like for me, it's about adjusting to that void and getting more comfortable, and trying to remember the things about like what makes me laugh, like what alone in my house stoned off my ass is like making me laugh, and like will that translate in this void that we're all performing into now. And so it's a big adjustment, and it's one that I'm still like figuring out, to be perfectly honest. Like it's definitely uncomfortable, but we're all learning, we're all figuring it out. I'm not somebody who does like front facing camera characters or, you know, amazing Instagram lives, so it's just something that like it's a little bit like getting over the embarrassment, because I remember at the beginning of this I was like, oh, I'm not going to do characters. I'm not going to like, that's not me. And people will immediately know that it's not me. It's me trying to like force myself into it. And now I'm sort of at a point where it's like, I wish I would have started sooner, because I'm going to eventually have to start creating content that is at home. And if I want to stay relevant. And so, yeah, it's tough.
I imagine. I mean, and it's funny, again, a lot of the unique boons of comedy, I can see them also being obstacles in this world in a way that other people don't face. You know, like I've had to diversify where I'm doing work, but not necessarily how I'm doing work in the same way. And I think at the same time, one of the positives is that the hunger has to be, and the demand has to be greater than ever. You know, now more than even in March. You know, there was that moment where everything that was in production was coming out on streaming, and you were like, oh, I'm stuck at home and I can watch. You know, thank God there's, I don't know, the next episode, the next season of The Expanse. But now we're in this moment where I feel like sort of vital and sort of fresh. I don't want to say live because it doesn't have to be live, but more immediate content is going to be taking over, because a lot of things can't be in production. You can't say, oh, we were 2 weeks away from finishing this. Here's this perfectly finished HBO series. For the most part, obviously it is possible, and some people are. And so I think that the demand is there, maybe greater than ever. And I think that people will innovate, yourself included, because we have a live, hungry, client base and an audience base that wants this content. So it's a fascinating time, and it's fascinating for me because I wouldn't have even been able to talk to you or any of the other folks in the series had we not been sitting here, all of us sitting here in our homes. And so it's funny the things you find to do to ease that creative need. We're going to wrap up in a second. But that said, like, again, we met at a comics convention. I think back, this is a weird cut, by the way, but I think back to Nicki Minaj and Stephen Colbert's interview. And I distinctly remember, which, by the way, great interview for folks who haven't seen it, especially the 10-minute version where she just makes him turn into a puddle of goo. But in it, he says, you could probably do what I do, but I don't think that I could do what you do. And he doesn't think that he could rap like Nicki Minaj. So I don't think I could do what you do. Because to be quite honest, like, there are people that think that I can be entertaining, but it's largely reactionary. Like I never have an inciting action. Yes, I can mock some chode really, really easily because I'm, hateful and from Central New York. But it's not the same thing. And a lot of people think it is. But I do think you could do what I do. So let me bring it around to finish up and say you're in my shoes. We did meet talking about comic books. Now here we are talking about agave. We're at the bar. It's Comic-Con. We've had a bottle of what you're drinking. What is the story you pitch me? Say you are me. What is the thing you pitch me? You got one comic story. Huh?
Oh man, I mean, it
Or
would
you have?
probably be. This is such uh, a lame answer, but like it would be like a Black Canary in Gotham story. That's like those are my favorite. If she's my favorite hero, I guess like DC wise. Randomly, first comic book I ever got, and I've been like fascinated about that character ever since. And so I would probably have to start there. I don't know what the story is yet, but like Black Canary in Gotham, like on her own, that's definitely where I'd start. A noir sort of detective story, kicking ass, that sort of thing.
She takes her ponytail down. Everybody sees her in a different
Yeah,
way.
exactly. Return to the fish too.
But hey,
I
man.
think it's part of the story.
I mean, we just sold it properly. Someone's probably watching. Um, so listen, I really appreciate you taking a minute. It's been good talking to you at length as well, because it has, well, in person been a long time because you've been blown up and LA is far away, probably the longest continental flight, Boston to LA. So I appreciate you talking and drinking this Netta. Can you grab the bottle, because I only have the science bottle. Yours was so rare that I only get the science bottle. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we're tasting the Tequilana from Netta. It is great. As I said, as Joel said, the right type of burn, if you're drinking neat, opens up beautifully with a large format rock as well. And we're just here trying to find out what content means in this time of pandemic, whether it's comedy, whether it's comics, whether it's these damn conversation series. But I appreciate you taking time and helping me out with it. Thank you so much. And folks, we're going to be back with some new and exciting people as soon as possible. But in the meantime, Joel, listen, we're all excited to see what's next, whatever it is. So thank you again.
Thank you.